Hi everyone, welcome to Immigration USA. My name is Steve Maggi and I'm an immigration attorney in New York City. Today we're going to talk about the top 5 myths about US immigration. With me is Alex Vachon, an entrepreneur from Canada who's lived in the US for the last 5 years and owns a video production company. Welcome, Alex.
Hey.
Alex is going to be producing the show for us.
Great to be with you doing this. I'm excited to be here with you doing blabs on immigration. I think it's a great way to basically video blog, exchange ideas and also provide a lot of interesting information on immigration. And yes, I immigrated to the US 5 years ago, and I'm in New York City. I founded a production company called Cartouche Creations. Let's go through the 5 myths. It's very timely to go through those myths about U.S. immigration, don't you think?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, immigration is at the forefront now of the political debates that you're seeing for the nominations on the Republican and the Democratic side. It's an issue that President Obama has been trying to address for the past few years, and there are a lot of misconceptions about the state of U.S. immigration. So we wanted to debunk those myths.
All right, fantastic. So what is myth number 5?
Myth number 5 is that foreign university graduates take jobs from Americans because they can be paid less.
Can they be paid less?
No, they can't. The reason is there's a requirement called prevailing wage. Prevailing wage is essentially the minimum wage for the position and for the level of experience of each candidate. So before you submit an H-1B petition, for example, which is for professional workers, you have to do an attestation to the Department of Labor and pledge that you're going to pay the minimum wage as determined by Department of Labor based on the position and the experience level.
I see. So the job market still dictates how much they're paid, even if they're foreign graduates.
Absolutely. And many times the numbers that are required by Department of Labor are actually higher than what's being paid to Americans. It actually drives the salaries up. And so that actually would discourage U.S. employers from hiring foreign nationals. It's the complete opposite of the myth, which is that they're hiring foreign nationals so they can pay them less than what the market bears.
I see. Great. All right, that's myth number 5. Myth number 4.
Myth number 4 is that foreign companies which launch U.S. subsidiaries only benefit the foreign entities.
So as immigration attorney, a good portion of your business here in New York City is to help people be transferred to U.S. subsidiaries.
Yeah, I mean, one of the visas we work on a lot is called L1. It's called Intra-Company Transfer Visa. And essentially what that means is any company that exists overseas for more than 1 year can launch a wholly owned subsidiary or a partnership here in the U.S., and they can transfer managers, executives, and employees that are considered having specialized knowledge to work at the U.S. companies. The myth, though, is that they're only transferring those people, that U.S. jobs are not being created, and that's not correct. The intra-company transfer visas are predicated on job creation, meaning not enough to say we're going to set up a subsidiary and then we want to transfer 2 people there and that's all we're going to do. You have to have a 5-year business plan that projects job creation for U.S. citizens. The more U.S. citizens you project in terms of creating jobs, the more likely you will have an approval of that visa petition. And then when you go for a renewal, you have to show that those positions were actually created and that you are benefiting the U.S. economy. If you don't generate revenue, don't hire Americans, you will not be able to renew those visas. So that's why it's a myth.
It's definitely a myth because job creation is a huge criteria to be selected.
It's the most important one, absolutely.
Got it. So myth number 3 about U.S. immigration.
Myth number 3 is that immigrant-owned businesses take market share from American-owned businesses.
So many people believe that myth. That's incredible, actually.
Yeah, and it's completely unfounded and unprecedented. The truth is that in terms of percentages versus the general population, there's a higher percentage of immigrant entrepreneurs launching startup businesses than those set up by American citizens. There's also, it's important to keep in mind that in many places like New York City, 75% or more of the population is third generation immigrant or second or even first generation. So a lot of them may be U.S. citizens as well, first generation or naturalized, and they're also entrepreneurs. So a big percentage of businesses that are owned here in New York are really immigrant owned. The important thing to keep in mind is that they are not taking market share. What they're actually doing is making the market more competitive. They're bringing in new services, products. They're creating better designs, better products, improving services. The demand goes up, then the quality of the products in the industry also goes up, and that lowers the price to consumers. So they're not only helping in terms of creating jobs because they all need to hire local people, but they're also benefiting the economy and consumers in the long run. So that's a myth.
That's very interesting. I just want to say also that when you come from another country, you bring in your culture in here, and what you come up in terms of solutions for your clients is oftentimes a little different than what local companies would provide. I know I can talk for myself, and I'm providing some services that no one else are providing, and it might be because I come from another culture, and it contributes to the economy because of that.
Yeah, and we've seen a lot of companies over the years that come from somewhere else, or the entrepreneurs come from somewhere else. They have different ways of thinking, and that way of thinking generates a new trend in their industry, which is then followed by American companies. Don't forget, these are all American companies in the end, whether they're owned by immigrants or they're owned by U.S. citizens. They're all U.S. companies, and they're all generating revenue and hiring Americans.
Absolutely. All right, myth number 2.
Okay, myth number 2 is probably the longest standing myth. I think this is a myth that's existed here in popular culture since the first big immigration wave of the 1890s, which is that illegal aliens take jobs from American citizens.
Illegal aliens now we're talking about.
Yes, undocumented foreign nationals.
These workers, aren't they getting underpaid or paid at a minimum wage?
Well, I think it's first important to underline that they're taking jobs that Americans wouldn't take. These jobs are oftentimes not even on the grid. They're part of what I would call the invisible labor class. They're working jobs that are not only minimum wage, but many times less than minimum wage, off the books. And Americans would not take those jobs because they wouldn't have the protection of the law. They wouldn't have protection of labor laws, liability. And many times, just in terms of practical reality, if Americans were to take some of these jobs, they could not live above the poverty level.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Great. That's a big myth. And now, myth number 1 on U.S. immigration.
Okay. The biggest myth today, and you've seen it, it's a very big topic in our presidential debates that we're seeing this year, is that the deportation of all undocumented immigrants is a viable solution to the immigration problem.
Yes. How many people are we talking about here?
The conservative estimate is 12 million. I would say it's probably closer to 15 million undocumented immigrants in the United States right now.
Wow, that's half of the Canadian population almost.
Yeah, and you're talking about 4 or 5% of the actual U.S. population. It's a lot of people. Yeah.
Oh, wow. And the thing is, you deport them. What's stopping them from coming back?
Well, I think there's a few issues here. The first is, let's say you actually get all these people and put them in processing. Right now, there's a backlog on immigration cases, and that's for less than 1 million open cases. So if you add 15 million to that, you're talking about conservatively 5 years, but I would guess closer to 10 years where you could actually process everyone.
Wow.
Then you have the other issue, right, which is, how do you keep them from coming back, like you said, as soon as they're deported? And how about another part of that? The other wrinkle is, how do you get the number to 0 when, as you're deporting many people, there are also more people coming in?
And also, what industries would be affected? I'm sure some would be really hard hit by that.
Well, we were talking earlier, myth number 2, about immigrants taking jobs from Americans. You're talking about industries where the labor force really drives the industry. So you're talking about agricultural industry. If you go to Florida or California, for example, you see a lot of people working picking the oranges, the almonds, etc. That I don't know if Americans would take those jobs if they could do the work at that salary and make a living. So they're highly dependent. And then, of course, you're talking about hospitality industry, restaurants, hotels, domestic workers. And then here in New York, you see a lot of construction workers that are not the Latin Americans that you see, let's say, in the agricultural industry. They're from Eastern Europe many times or other parts of the world.
So we're talking really big impact if you start deporting undocumented workers.
Well, I think on an economic level, it doesn't make a whole lot of sense. You're talking about, rough estimate, $250 billion to process all these deportations.
Yeah.
Number one, where does that money come from? And number two, what people often don't talk about is that a large number of undocumented immigrants actually pay income taxes here.
That's a good point.
And we're talking about billions and billions of dollars. I think the estimate when they were talking about doing full immigration reform is that they could eventually generate trillions of dollars in revenue based on all the back taxes and forward taxes for all people that would be on the path to citizenship.
Uncle Sam would not be happy.
And then the last part is, how do you quantify the loss of that labor force which drives a lot of these industries? So that's the biggest myth, and it's the biggest driver of a lot of the rhetoric that you see in these political debates now.
Wow. Well, thanks, Steve. Thanks for making the facts straight about immigration. Really, it's such an important and emotional debate right now. It's good to hear what the facts are and what reality really is about.
I think it's important to remove the emotion from this when you debate anything. It's very important, even if you just want to look at economics. It's important to realize that immigrants drive the economy with the businesses that they start, that they run, and that even undocumented immigrants contribute positively to our society. Like I said, they are the real driving force of this invisible labor class that drives a lot of our important industries that all of us depend on.
It doesn't mean that, you want the status quo, that, you don't want to do anything with all these undocumented workers, but deporting them is going to damage the U.S. economy much more than anything else.
I would recommend to the viewers that they watch a movie called Un Día Sin Mexicanos, A Day Without Mexicans.
Oh, yeah.
It's very symbolic of it's obviously a fantasy film.
Okay.
Eventually, all of Southern California shuts down when these Mexicans magically disappear. That would happen nationwide. It would really paralyze our economy, on top of paralyzing our moral fiber and all of those really important things that are the underpinning of our society here that was founded by immigrants. So it's very important not to lose sight of that.
All right, so I suggest that we run some questions that we have on the Blab right now.
Sure.
We have Amin who is asking, what is the process of moving to California, Silicon Valley as a tech worker? And what are the probability rates for being accepted?
Okay, so the first and most important thing is to make sure that you have an actual offer of employment and you have a sponsor. All employment visas require a U.S. sponsor, which means in this case a U.S. company. So Amin would have to get an offer from a tech company in Silicon Valley, and then we would have to evaluate the kind of visa categories that would apply. In this case, usually it's H-1B, which is what we talked about with our one of our myths today, and that's essentially for professional workers. So if he has a university degree, he could be sponsored by a company in California under that visa category, but he has to have a sponsor and an offer. Well, there's another possibility, which is one that we work a lot here, is to search for a company that's majority Dutch owned. If the company in the US is at least 50% Dutch owned, Amin may be eligible for an E2 visa. So you have to look for alternative strategies because H-1B has cap problems.
The caps.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you, Amin, for your question. If you have any follow-up, you can get in touch with Steve on his website. There's a contact form.
Thank you, Amin. Appreciate the question.
And we have here also Crystal.
Okay.
Crystal.
Hi, Crystal.
have you heard of Sergio Garcia? He was admitted to the bar here in California, and he's undocumented. Big
Yes,
case.
I have, and there are unfortunately, Crystal, there are many similar cases here because essentially you have people who came in as children. Usually, their parents brought them here, or they were sent here. Then they were able to actually go through the educational system, get PhDs, master's degrees, JDs, like in this case, sit for a bar exam and pass it. And then because they're undocumented, they can't change their status. Even if Sergio Garcia was offered a job at the best law firm in California and he's passed the bar and he's admitted to practice law, he cannot adjust his status, or in this case, change his status and be able to work. Unless he qualifies for what's called deferred action for childhood arrivals, which right now allows him to get employment authorization. But if he doesn't meet those specific deadlines and those requirements in terms of his age and when he came in, then unfortunately it doesn't make any difference how qualified he is. And that's happened to a lot of people where they get a degree and then they can't actually work.
All right. I hope that answers your question. You are following up.
Yeah, I'm happy to talk to you in more detail, but essentially what I was talking about was H-1B. H-1B does not have any nationality requirements. It just requires that somebody have a university degree or the equivalent and have a job offer. The second option was if you're hired by a Dutch-owned company. The Netherlands is one of the biggest investors. I think it's third or fourth now in the U.S.
Really?
And also a lot of entrepreneurs. So there are more than 1,000 Dutch-owned businesses just here in the U.S. And so I always recommend to my Dutch clients that they search for potential job offers from those companies to get an employment, because then you can be employed anytime during the year.
And there's less of a cap issue.
There's no cap issue with the E2 visa. So if it's a majority Dutch-owned U.S. business, they can be petitioned for anytime during the year, and 3 to 4 months later can have their work visa.
Okay, fantastic. Well, I think it's time to wrap up,
Okay.
Steve. Did you like this format, the Blab format?
I like it. I'm looking forward to the next one.
Yeah, so we'll do one 2-3 weeks from now.
Okay.
And thank you guys to be participating in this first Blab of ours. We're excited to be here.
Thank you, Crystal. Thanks, Amin. And
Yeah.
of course, Alex, thanks for facilitating this. I'm looking forward to the next one.
You bet.
Okay.
All right. See you guys.
Okay.